Wow, here we are again, Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. Now you remember my testimony is I got saved 1972 at 3 o'clock in the morning, November 5th. Well, by 1982, 83, I was introduced to the real life of really studying spiritually. And by visiting often, we visited Tennessee Temple often. Almost like I got an education from there because I sat under those people who were professors there and who were teachers there. And then we were introduced to much other type of things in the 80s that we didn't really get involved in the 70s. But I know that it was in 73 that the thing was brought in, the abortion thing was brought in. And by 83, in 10 years span from 73 to 83, that there had been several million babies had been aborted. And we had a figure, I had it up, I was reading it just a little bit ago, that how many babies had been aborted, and it was millions in those first 10 years that were aborted. And then there was 55 million the first 10 years. And so since then, there's probably been 100 million. But going back over and looking at my work that I did in the 80s, and the things that I studied during that period of time, that's just schooling time. Actually, that's supposed to be a lifelong experience. If you learn this stuff, you learn it. But as we've grown so fast in periods, we've grown so fast in the United States of America in periods, because that period of 73 to 83 was the setting for the devil to come up with the what was written in 1933, which was called the Humanist Manifesto. And they begin to, it had been working underneath, churning just under the water, churning under the water, just churning under the water. And as it churned and it came up, it surfaced in the 80s. And as it surfaced in the 80s, people began to talk about it. And they said, what is this deal, this humanist bunch of people? Well, those are the people that had worked their way into the White House and into the government officials, into state offices, into judgeships, into places to where they were high-powered people. And they begin to stick their heads up and bring up things that were humanistically done. And one of the reasons why is the humanist believes they can be permissive in their life, indulge in alcohol, indulge in women other than their wife, and wives other than their husbands, and indulge in what's pleasure, only what's pleasure, and have pleasure. They can have a boat to go out on and enjoy doing evil things on their boat, on their yacht. And they can feel free to do it because they're humanist. Because all they believe in is what the Human Manifesto says, that wine, women, and song is what we were born for. Now that's what we're born for. That's how we should live. We should live wine, women, and song and enjoy what life we have because we've evolved into what we are and where we are and who we are. And let's just enjoy to the fullest in the sin area of life. And just live in it and enjoy it and do the best we can and in it. Well, I got news for you. When you face the judgment seat of God, and you will face it, you will be cast into the lake of fire if you follow the Humanist Manifesto. That you are here just to please yourself. And so that's what it came to. You know what the humanists come to? Do you know that Joseph in the Bible, he had 11 brothers? Do you know they were humanists? And they decided they didn't need Joseph. Joseph was a spiritual man. They said, we don't need this brother, this babbler. We don't need him. We need to get rid of him. We're going to put him out of the way. So they put him down in a hole. And then they sold him off to some people and got rid of him. Then they lied about him to their father. But that's what the humanist is. The humanist is a liar. Now, I read a little thing just a few minutes ago that I had read earlier in life, 10, 12, 20 years ago, and that the humanists believe that lying is not a good thing unless you need to do it. Now, there will come a time in your humanist life when you'll have to perfect lying and lie to cover up where you are and what you're doing and everything to keep everything under the covers. Well, I got news for you. At the judgment seat of Christ, there will be no lying that will work. There will be nothing that won't be uncovered. So if you're living as a humanist, when the day comes of judgment, you will be judged for the way you're living. You know what humanists are like? They're like the Hindus in India. The Hindus in India, they won't kill cows because they think, and they won't kill rats, and they won't even kill mice. Why? Because they think they're incarnated human beings. And if they're incarnated human beings, they need to eat. The cows alone consume more food than would feed the whole country. Just the cows alone. They eat more food than would feed the whole country. There are more cows almost now than there are people. And there are more rats than there are people. And there are more mice than there are people. They can't grow food, keep food, or do anything for the rats and mice. Do you know the cows eat enough food to feed 7 people every day? And there are 200 million. In my paperwork that I studied in the 80s, there were 200 million cows in India. 200 million. No wonder babies are starving to death. They won't feed the baby any food because the food's sacred. Wow. Did you know that if they would eat the cows, start eating the cows, they could feed over 1,400,000,000 people, which is 1/4 of the population of the whole country, with eating those cows. It's unreal. God promised adequate provision for every country. And He showed them how to have it. You grow food and you raise food. How did God take care of His priests? He had thousands of priests around the temple. Those people brought in lambs, goats, sheep, cattle, everything but swine. They brought in everything but swine. They brought fish. They brought things in, everything but swine, and into the sacrificial ceremonial place. And the priest killed all of those animals, and the priest and their families, thousands of Levites, all the Levitical people didn't own any land. They didn't own any cattle. They didn't own any farm. They couldn't raise any food. All they could do is take what was brought to them by the people. How do you think they ate? They ate that food that was offered on the altar. And God told them how to dissect that food and what to throw away. Throw away the liver and the lights and all of the things God said to throw away, not to eat. They took out and they put it on the dung heap where it burned day and night forever. They started that fire and it never ever went out. And they put all of that waste on that fire. and they cooked what was good, and they divided it amongst the priest and the Levite tribes and amongst themselves, and they ate good. That's how God provided the food for them, through their sacrifice. Did you think that all that was sacrificed just burned up? There were times of the year when they actually sacrificed thousands of animals and had a great feast that lasted many days. And that priestly job, that's what it was. It was a working job. Being a priest was a working job. You didn't sit in a little booth and give indulgence to people. You were out there working. You had to slice that sheep, slice that goat, peel the skin off them, do a place where they did the tanning of the skins, where they used the skins to bring in money and bring in other things. They used the skins to cover themselves. They used the skins to build their tents with. And they used the skins for many reasons. And then they ate the food. And then they used the bones for other things. This was not just a sacrificial place to God. This was a place where God provided for them for their sacrifice and for their work. So, if we'll serve God in the capacity that we're supposed to serve Him, He will provide for us. I guarantee it. He will provide for you. He has provided for me ever since November 5th, 1972. He has provided for me. We have not gone without, and I've been self-employed. And does the Bible specifically teach that abortion is murder? My goodness. We studied things in the Old Testament, and now here we come up to, we studied false religions, and now we come into our own country, into America. America aborts babies while they're in the belly. Other countries, back in those olden days, many of them sacrificed their babies after they were born, that laid them in the arms of Molech, the Molech god, the iron god, big iron god with fire under it. It was red hot at all times. They'd walk down there and lay their baby in those hands and offer it to Molech, and it would burn up. I don't know if that's worse than abortion or not, but it is killing a baby. And there were times when that was done. The Bible makes it very clear that the unborn child possesses genuine human life. Jesus Christ Himself, being put in Mary's womb, made the transition to the earth at the point of conception. When the Holy Spirit put that seed in there, that was the point of conception. That was Jesus Christ, not yet birthed, but that was Him. It was in the womb that He took up the form as all other men do, of human being, the form of a human being, grew in His mother's womb and was made in the likeness of men. So God came down in a seed and was made in the likeness of men. You say, how could God do that? Well, you know, God was the one that put the seed in Adam and Eve. God was the one that put the seed. He said, let us make man in our own image, and He made Adam in His own image. And then all other people came in the image of Adam, which was the image of God. And here Jesus came down, didn't look any different than anybody else. Was a normal human being, just like anybody else. And walked on the earth. Yet, He was God in the flesh. And when John the Baptist was yet in his mother's womb, he leaped. You remember when Mary went over and hugged Elizabeth, that John the Baptist was filled with the Holy Spirit in his mother's womb? And he was a live baby in his mother's womb? Do you know that John the Baptist was only going to come and walk on the earth for 33 and a half years? Just as Jesus did? And he died and went to heaven in his time. The joy that Elizabeth felt when she hugged Mary is the kind of joy you and I are supposed to feel when we hug Jesus. Well, you say, Brother Peter, how are you going to hug Jesus? I hug him through the Word. I read his Word. I lay in bed at night, put my arms up and talk to the Lord. And tears come out of my eyes. And I have light. I can get under my blankets and have light. That's how you hug God. That's how you worship God. You get on his side all the way. Not halfway, not 2/3 of the way, but all the way. When you get on his side all the way, he will come and sup with you and you with him. When you come to the place to where you love God enough so that you get overwhelmed by him. Jesus Christ made the transition. John the Baptist made the transition. Jacob and Esau began their conflict with each other in the womb. They wrestled with each other in their mother's womb to see who would come out first. And one of them stuck his foot out before he was supposed to. And they pushed his foot back in and pulled the other one out. And the truth of the matter is, the one that stuck his foot out was the one that was supposed to come out first. So God made a way for Jacob and Esau to switch birthrights. When he came in and he wanted some porridge, Esau, and he was hungry, Jacob says, I'll give you some, but you got to give me your birthright. And he gave him his birthright for a bowl of porridge. Scripture teaches that transgression of Adam are passed on to us at conception, not at birth. The second we are conceived in that seed that man has, we have sin put on us. We are born in sin. And until we get to the age of accountability, if we were to die before the age of accountability, when is that? It could be 8 years old. It could be 5. It could be 7. It could be 20. The age for different people of accountability is different times. If I go to a country who has never heard about Jesus, in the deep, dark jungle somewhere, there's jungles everywhere besides Africa, they're everywhere. And I went into that jungle and I met a tribe. And I told them about Jesus, and they're 60, 70 years old. And they just heard the word first time. They're accountable. What happens if they die before then? That's up to God, not you and I. You and I can't say. You say, but they danced around a totem pole and did all kinds of things. I don't care what they did. That's up to God. God's the one that deals with man's heart, not you and I. We don't know a man's heart. Not really. And so we don't know that. The 6th commandment of the Bible has to do with aborting a baby. Now, back in the Bible, it said if you have an ox and your ox gores a woman that is pregnant, that she lose her child. you are accountable for the death of that child. And you will have to go through loops, jump through humps and loops to get that taken care of. If a man take another man's life, even by accident there, his life was required. So, if a man strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him. And he shall pay the judge determined, and if any mischief follows, then thou shalt give life for life. Eye for eye, and tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, and stripe for stripe. Wow. That was quite a proclamation right there. This man owns an ox and it gored the woman. Wow. I've got some scriptures right here if you want to write them down. I'm not going to turn and read them right now, but I'll give them to you. The book of Philippians, chapter 2, 5 through 8. Got a pencil yet? Get one up. You may have to back up and do this again. Luke 1, 41 and 44. See Genesis 25, 22 through 23. See Psalm 51 and 5. See Exodus 20 and verse 13. See Exodus 21, 22 through 25. Why am I not reading those to you? I want you to read them for yourself. I want God to speak to you through His Word, not through me. If you open the Bible and let God speak to you, He will speak much greater than I can. One of the most respected and scholarly commentaries on the Old Testament is by Keil, Keil and Delitzsch, Delitzch. Their clarification on this verse is as follows. If no injury was done to either the woman or the child that was born, a composition was to be paid. Just a penury one, not much. The plural is explored for the purpose of speaking identically because of the might possibly be more than one child in the womb. But if injury occurred to the mother or the child, thou shalt give soul for soul, eye for eye. Thus perfect retribution was to be made. Wow. Man, that was quite a statement. And nowadays, we have the abortionists ripping children out of mothers piece by piece because they're not allowed to take it out alive and then kill it. So they kill it in the womb. They give it a saline solution in the womb and kill the baby in the womb. Then cut it out section by section and pull a leg out, pull another leg out, pull an arm out, pull another arm out, pull the cavity, chest cavity out, pull the baby out, put it in a box, give it to a woman. She walks across the hospital, takes it over there and disposes of it. Supposedly. I understand nowadays they figured out how to sell those body parts, make money on them, and use them for many other things and many other reasons, many other ways. It's a funny thing how they could ironically say in the name of the institution of learning or the possibility of something from this baby making another person live longer or do something for that other person, they reason themselves within themselves that it's okay. The Bible said that what a man allows himself to do and doesn't condemn himself for, it don't bother him. So sin doesn't bother a lot of people. Wow. I got so much material here that I have out that we had gone through and did back all the way back to many things. And I read just recently about the First Amendment of the United States Constitution established a separation of church and state. What did I just say? The First Amendment. We have a Constitution. So then we get an amendment to the Constitution. Well, what does it do? It's supposed to amend the Constitution from what it says and add to it. So now they're adding to it to establish the separation of church and state. There should be no separation from church and state. The church is in the state, and the church is put there by God, and the church is part of the state, and the church is the moral side of the state, and morality should rule. What's moral should rule. You should not go out and walk down the street naked. That's a moral decision. You should not walk down the street naked. Okay, moral decision. Well, the church is in the state, or the church is in the United States. The church is part of the United States. It is the part of the United States that wasn't supposed to be legally brought into legality. It was the spiritual side. So the First Amendment of Congress made a law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. We are supposed to be free to worship anywhere, anytime we want to, as believers in God. But no, the amendment comes and requires by the states, in order to prevent federal government from establishing a national denominational church such as exists in England. Well, that's a cover-up. I don't believe we ever would have ended up in the United States of America with another deal like they have in England, where we had a monarchy that told everybody what they could do and couldn't do. No. So it was designed to protect state establishment churches or state-preferred Christian denominations since the time of the First Amendment in 1791. Over one-third of the 13 colonies had established churches. Wow. Those the 13 colonies have established churches in those days. And by the way, the Bible was the tutor book. That's the book they used. They learned from the Bible. By studying the Bible, they learned how to read, and they learned how to write, and they learned mathematics. This phase, wall of separation, is not found in the Constitution, nor is the term church and state. Thomas Jefferson, who had nothing to do with the phrase wall of separation between church and state, in a letter written in 1802. Thomas Jefferson, in 1805, inaugural address, Jefferson clarified that the statement referred to the separation between the church and the federal government. That's different between the church and the state. Jefferson clarified it the way it should be. In other words, the federal government can't come and rule the church. Neither can the church go and rule the federal government. We can pray for the federal government, but we can't involve ourselves. Thomas Jefferson's wall of separation phrase has only been grossly misprinted and misrepresented its original content, but it has now been tragically misapplied to mean separation of God from the government. So the government says, hey, Thomas Jefferson says, we don't have no God in the government. God doesn't be in the government. We're in the government. We're the ones run the government, us the people, and not God. Well, you take God out of anything, and you've got nothing. If you take God out of the government, you ain't got nothing but the devil run the government. Hey, when men reject God's commandments in favor of human reasoning, the logical conclusion are exactly the opposite of truth and the opposite of righteousness. God becomes evil, and good is evil. And darkness for light, and light for darkness, bitter for sweet, and sweet for bitter. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes, God says, and the prudent in their own sight. Wow. Those are supposed to be wise and prudent people in the government. They have control over all the 50-something states. And they have a say-so. And what they say is supposed to be so. So we need to really watch and be careful of that, what we do and say. You remember the Jamestown tragedy where Jim Jones rejected the Bible? He threw the Bible to the floor, stating to many people are looking at this instead of looking at me. You look at me. Don't look at that Bible. You look at me. I'm the guy. In other words, he was claiming he was another Jesus. And the Bible said if another Jesus comes along, do not believe him. And he rejected God, Jones did. He referred to himself as God. Rejected God's moral standards and promoted immorality and perversion. He wanted to have children by every woman in his group. He demanded shared possessions. He fostered mainly attitudes about death. He and his followers carried out the ultimate act of humanism. What is that? Suicide. Every humanist lives on this earth, lives without God. When they come down to the end, they'll come down to nothing but left to them but suicide. Because they have no heaven to look forward to and don't know it, but they're going to die and go straight into hell and live forever in hell and fire and brimstone. Until Christ returns to set up his kingdom, Satan will continue to deceive people. He'll continue to deceive nations. Any nation that rejects God or Jesus Christ will burn in hell. Wow, any person that does that. Our time's come and gone. As a matter of fact, I'm about 3 minutes over it. And we'll see you next time. Right, bye-bye.